Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mr. D's Movie Club. And today we're going to have a little weird science, except we won't be talking about weird science because that movie is highly inappropriate for a high school movie club. But we wanted to talk a little science fiction, and I don't mean science fiction like Star Wars or Star Trek, but science fiction where the science really sits in the background of the film, but it's mostly grounded in a reality that we all at least can see and understand. And there are three movies, and the cool thing about the movies that we picked, they're all from about the same generation in the mid-'80s, and all of them, for the most part, are family-friendly. You can watch them with all ages. The only thing where mileage may vary might come into understanding and interest level. Some of them deal with different things thematically. So we're going to start with the first one, which is a really underappreciated movie. Came out in the late 80s, called The Rocketeer. And The Rocketeer is based on a very little read comic book. It feels very Indiana Jonesy. It's a lot of fun to watch. And it's about a guy who's a stunt pilot right at the precursor, right before World War II started, who discovers a rocket. And he uses the rocket to essentially fight Nazis who are trying to infiltrate the United States through the movie industry. Timothy Dalton, who was a really underappreciated James Bond figure, really is great in the movie. It's really, really well cast. Very young Jennifer Connelly, well before she became Oscar contenders and all that fun stuff. So The Rocketeer, it's such a throwback that I can't imagine not having just a big smile on your face while you're watching the whole thing. I am in fact such a big fan of The Rocketeer that I have not one, but two Rocketeer action figures. This one's kind of a cool black and white variant. Now our next movie is, again, a classic. There's a couple of stumbling blocks that might not make it as accessible for some of our younger kind of teenagery high school audiences. And that's the movie Wargames. Now, Wargames is a really great meditation on technology and its role in our life, and military and defense, and really, really some complicated topics, which I think actually we should steer into, not shy away from, because they do really bring about lots of really important conversations. I think the stumbling block is that while there's a lot of action, it's a relatively intellectual film, so it might not move as fast as some audiences might like. And I do think that the technology already feels so dated. You know, I'm shooting this on a phone, which already has more technological ability than the entire Whopper computer that gets hacked into in the film. So that might bring about some laughs and some chuckles. But I think when you dig through it and you get into the movie, and it's really, really well acted by Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, it really, again, brings about some really good conversations, and some of the best movies, regardless of age, are designed to do that, to get us to talk about things. And so we can talk about things like what happens if we get too technologically driven in our own lives, and how do we kind of prevent that from happening. I'm actually super nervous having just said that, because I'm sure my Alexa heard me. Now for our third movie today, you know what? All I want to say is, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. Ba 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 da 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 da. Back to the Future is, honestly, it's one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. It was one of those ones where I remember exactly where I was the first time I saw it. I was at my own 7th grade birthday party. We had taken a whole bunch of my friends at school to see the movie. And you know what, honestly, it holds up, and I'm a big fan of the entire trilogy. And so if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. Michael J. Fox, and it's so sad what's happened with him and Parkinson's, but it's just utterly charming in the film. Christopher Lloyd is great. Crispin Glover, particularly in the first one. Leah Thompson, who was one of my very first movie crushes. And the weird thing was, I played at a film festival 2 years ago that she was in with a movie of her own, and I still wasn't able to talk to her. It was very, very weird, and I felt very Like, I think I made it about halfway across the low lounge area to say hi, and I found other things to do because I could not speak to Leah Thompson. So I highly recommend it. And one of the cool things to talk about beyond that the movie's great, that the effects, I think, still hold up in a lot of ways. It is the story of family and the story of, would we go back and change certain things in our lives? The production of the movie is interesting because Michael J. Fox was, in fact, not the original actor cast. I believe he was the original choice, but because Family Ties was still a thing and he was just doing Teen Wolf, that they hired Eric Stoltz, and Steven Spielberg is the director of the film. Sorry, the producer of the film. Excuse me. Robert Zemeckis directed, and Spielberg looked at the dailies for the first 3 weeks of shooting and realized that Eric Stoltz, while a very good actor, it really wasn't working to have him as Marty. It wasn't. You weren't getting a lot of compassion from him. You weren't feeling. You weren't connecting with him right emotionally, and it was Spielberg who told Zemeckis, "You've got to recast." And so then they got Michael J. Fox, and the rest is history. But what's interesting is they shot 3 weeks of the film, and you can find some of those scenes on YouTube with Eric Stoltz. So it's very interesting. So again, I can highly recommend The Rocketeer, Wargames, and Back to the Future, the entire trilogy. And we do also have a faculty pick today. The ever popular Mr. Glenn saw the movie Onward, and he highly recommends it. I've seen it too. It's kind of funny because, I took us in a science direction, and one of our science teachers took us into magic with the movie Onward. It is new on Disney Plus, and it is, it's Pixar doing its thing. I found the movie to be completely moving and magical, and I was just delighted when Mr. Glenn recommended it. So that's some great stuff to recommend as we kind of move into the heat of the year and still kind of stuck doing this social distancing thing. So I hope you enjoy it. We've got a couple more episodes left for this season, or I guess this season. That's what it is, right? So we will be back next week to talk to you about some more great films.